Our goal with this panel today is to create a dynamic conversation that engages and educates the ignorance that is representative of our country today. Small steps like these are precursors for bigger change. They allow for ideas and experiences to be heard and for people to see things through a different lens. Maybe you can see a bit of yourself and your own experiences within our panelists and their stories. With that being said, we hope you all came with an open mind and open heart. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Jayla Holden. I'm 17 years old and I'm a DC native, so I'm from Washington.
Hey y'all, how y'all doing? That was so weak. I know you got class with me. My name is Bria. I'm 17 as well. I'm from Milwaukee, Wisconsin.
Hi everyone, my name is Omarina Cabrera, but I'm otherwise known as Omi. I'm originally from the Bronx in New York, but I'm actually a GW student. Hey, Bronx.
Hey everybody, my name is Trevon Bosley. I go by Trey. I'm 20 and I'm from Chicago. Gang.
Okay, so we're gonna get started with my first question. So how did you guys get involved in advocacy, and why is it important for you to be advocates of change? So you guys can start wherever.
Well, last year, I'm a student here in DC. I go to Thurgood Marshall Academy in Southeast DC, and last year, our school was brought back two horrific tragedies where two members of our community were killed during the night on a school day. And out of this sadness and grief, brought about a movement at our school. And we organized and we decided that change needed to be made because of course, the ongoing tragedies in the nation, but also the silence of our local lawmakers and politicians on the two deaths of the students in DC, and how we felt that it was unright and most importantly unjust.
Yeah, I agree with that. I grew up, well, I still grew up, I'm still a Pee-wee, but I live in Milwaukee. It's one of the most segregated cities in the nation. It's an inner city, and it's predominantly African American, so I walk outside my house, so you don't see brown and black people like, hey, what's up? What can I borrow some sugar? Stuff like that. So like we had like that community building, but then I'm a part of a program called Chapter 220 program. I'm not sure if a lot of people are aware of that, but it takes inner city kids, put them on a bus, drive them like 25 minutes outwards to diversify a white suburban school. So I was one of that, less than 1% of the African American community at a school where I felt very isolated and alone because no one looks like me or went through the same things as me. And so as a black woman or growing up as a black girl, I had to repress all of my issues because I couldn't talk to anyone about it. Because people don't like to be reminded of history, because history likes to repeat itself. So if you remind them of that history, they're going to repeat it, or they're not going to repeat it, different things. But growing up in this environment where I couldn't speak for my people about the issues that I have been suffering living in my inner city, it made me feel like my voice was so small and diminished. And I would still just have that voice so small and diminished and not ever speak up about it because I had no one to talk to. And I guess I reached a breaking point when last year two Post-its were put over the water fountains and it said white and colored at my school. And I looked at that picture, me being the person I am, trying to create an atmosphere for brown and black students at my school, because there's only about 15 students out of a 1,500 student body. I looked at that picture and I was like, we're going 3 steps backwards and we do not have our white allies here to support us. If no one else is upset about this issue, then we do not have everyone here being advocating for this issue, because it's so many different people that are affected by it. It's not just me being a African American woman, it's other different people. And not only that issue happening at my school, but it's different issues that I'm also passionate about. Gun violence every single day in inner city communities where they're being overlooked in media, and the black and brown students aren't given a platform to speak about injustice that we suffer every single day, because the media will give 10 minutes to this person but 10 seconds to that one. And if you're not inclusive in your message and diversifying that message, then you're not going to progress forward. So being able to speak for brown and black people and saying that we matter too, our issues are almost as or equal as importance to other people, that's how you progress forward in a movement when you're trying to reform these legislations, when you're trying to reform policies and get justice for every single person. Sorry.
That was incredible. I guess my story began in the Bronx. I lived there my whole life, and I don't know, growing up, I saw a lot of things that I wasn't okay with. I saw a lot of police brutality before police brutality was even a buzzword.
Right.
And I don't know, it hit close to home a lot. So I'm a twin with a boy, and he's like my best friend or whatever. And like growing up, like we were on the same trajectory. We were both in honors classes. Like, you know, we would compete in math and science and everything. Like he would copy my essays and do better than me. I didn't get it. And then like a couple years ago, he was arrested and he was incarcerated. He missed first 3 birthdays of his baby girl, and I miss, you know, my brother. So violence hits home for me. Gun violence hits home for me. When I was hearing you speak, you said a lot about being silenced, and I think the media has a really great way of making it seem accidental, you know? I think the media has a really great way of making it seem like, oh no, but this is what's happening. This is the big, you know, shooting, and it doesn't diminish their pain. It just really, really enlightens ours, because it's like, why don't we deserve the same, you know, why, we have stories too, you know? And so my whole life has been dedicated to education and building awareness around what really happens in the hood, because, you know, yeah, I claim it, I come from the hood, but I got here, so I come here, and I think, back to your question, I think it's important for us and young people like everyone in this audience to talk about the experiences that you've been through, because my brother doesn't have this privilege that I have right now. And I think that's something that a lot of times we forget. We sit in our classes. I'm preaching too, I'm so sorry. I think we sit in our classes a lot of times. We sit in our minimum wage jobs. We sit in these places we don't want to be. And we forget where we come from and where we're going. And I think places like this and conversations like this kind of remind us a little bit, like, what is the point? And so that's why I come to things like this and speak, because I want to remind people of what's the point.
Well, I got involved basically with gun violence April 4th, 2006. My brother, Terrell Bosley, he was shot and killed at church while getting ready for band rehearsal. And ever since that day, I got involved with a group called Brave, which is a youth organization that goes out in the community and does a whole bunch of stuff. And that was just my answer to the situation, because my brother was killed at church doing the right thing, going to college, doing the right thing, and yet he was still gunned down, with the narrative being, oh, it was a gang-related shooting. Oh, it's Chicago. People just get shot. That's just how it goes. So with all that going on, that was the main force that pushed me to get involved. Because, like, just today, I just checked the stats just a few minutes ago, 2,404 people have been shot and killed in Chicago, shot in Chicago just this year. Like, that angers me. And just reading that stat and knowing of my friends and my family, my cousins, all these people that are constantly being shot and killed, and they're nothing more than just a number on the news, that infuriates me. So that's the main reason I go out in the community, I speak up, and I do what I need to do just to raise the voice of the black and brown people that die every day.
Thank you for sharing. According to the Bureau of Justice Statistics, police training on average takes only 21 weeks to complete, while it takes many years for lawyers to become experts in the law. Given that police are trusted to be experts in the law through their enforcement of it, what do you think about this policy? And based on your experience with police in your community, what are the implications of this?
I think that, of course, the policy is BS.
I don't know.
Especially because I believe that race is a social construct. These are things that are taught, that are built into people as they grow up. This is not public knowledge. This doesn't just happen. These are things people are taught. This is not normal. Like, this is taught. These behaviors, these stereotypes. So for police training to only be 21 weeks, but to become a lawyer takes years and years of teaching and schooling. I think that it is a reflection of the state of our country today. Yeah. Police brutality is, of course, a huge problem in our communities, and this is the reason why, because police can go into a room, they sit for 21 weeks, they learn how to be a police officer, but they don't learn about the communities that they are policing.
Mm-hmm.
They learn how to shoot a gun, they learn what people to arrest and why, but they don't learn what the implications of their actions and how they affect a community. So, yeah, that's my answer to that question.
I see a lot of flag shirts in the March for Our Lives. Who has a flag for on? Yeah, that's dope. So one of the policy points of March for Our Lives is disarming domestic abusers, and about 40% of police officers are domestic abusers. So it's like you're giving a person who's supposed to be an authority figure a firearm who are domestic abusers. They're using that excessive force that they have exemplified in their home and bringing it out into the workforce. You are cycling out these police officers who don't represent the people that they are incarcerating. And when you have that bridge between two different communities, you don't understand how people are living. In my community, when I see a police officer, I don't know about y'all, but I'm ducking and I'm hiding. Like, I need to go because I don't feel safe around people who are supposed to serve and protect me. Because what's projected in the media, when you see brown and black people being shot and killed by police officers, and the police officer not getting the justice, and the brown and black person not getting the justice they deserve, what does that show to a community who are fearing for their lives just being by police officers? And training a police officer for only 21 days and not getting the right things and materials that they need to know just shows that they're not putting so much effort in protecting our communities, but more of militarizing our communities. They're making us afraid to step out into our house, making us afraid to be pulled over by the cops. That shouldn't be right. And when you think about mass incarceration and who's being incarcerated, there's only, represented in our country, there's only 12% of black people, but in the mass, who are incarcerated, there's more than 50% of black and brown people being incarcerated. So you see these higher rates of disproportionate rates of black and brown people in the, I'm sorry, I'm going on a tangent, but in the prison systems, there aren't police officers who are actually representing us of who we need to be. I'm afraid of police officers, and that shouldn't be the narrative. I don't know about anyone else, but in my community, they're afraid of police officers because they are doing things to preserve and protect us. They're instilling a fear because they know they have that power structure to diminish who we are as valuable human beings. So,
yeah, I completely agree, and with what both of you said, and I think it's interesting, and I think it's something to ponder as a society about what are we willing to allow and accept as justice. And I don't know, when I think of a policeman, right, and I have this conversation with my friends all the time. It's kind of weird. We talk about social issues all the time, and the other day I was talking to one of my friends, and he says below key, they just handing out guns to these men, and women, right, because police officers, they're just handing out guns, and if you give me a gun, I might start walling out too. And I'm like, yo, but I never really made that connection. You give these people power, and then we're mad when they're using it, without no control, no nothing. I think it's more of a reflection of us as a society, and I think sometimes we're all F the police, F the police, and continue, and I think it's really easy to do that, but we don't ever look at the structures of power that are enabling them, right? I think that's a bigger discussion, and I think, going back to your point about domestic abusers, what kind of mental tests are you doing on these men? They're coming here to protect and serve. That's what you raise your left. This is not my left hand. This is what you raise your left hand to when you're saying that you're going to protect the oath, that you're going to protect the American citizens, because that's your job. Our tax dollars pay for your salary. So when you go out there and you're protecting and serving, what does that look like? What does that look like to the people who are paying your salary, right? And I think it's a question of what kind of mental tests are we doing? What kind of investigations are we doing? Because there's a lot of covering up. And then also, it comes back to us young people, to be really honest, to put that pressure on these politicians, to run ourselves. Because it's very easy to look back and be like, oh, all this shit, all this stuff is BS. All this stuff, they're going to keep on killing us. They're going to keep on killing us. They're going to keep on silencing us. It's very, very easy to be that pessimistic. It's very, very hard to stand up and fight for that. Fight for that representation. Really think about the structures that are putting these people in place, So that's kind of what I think about it. I think it's BS, but I think it's also our responsibility to kind of stand up to the challenge, to start asking all these questions.
Yeah, with the weeks that police are trained, you can visibly see it in the way that they police communities. And I had like 2 instances with the police in the same day, on the same night. I was dropping one of my friends off at her home, and she lived in like a suburb not too far from Chicago. I got pulled over. You would have thought I was doing a high-speed chase the way they surrounded my car. Like, it was cop cars in the front, behind me, it was like 3, 4, and they all came out of nowhere. And the cop, before he asked me license registration, anything, what was I doing wrong, he asked, why are you over here? Why are you in this neighborhood? Who do you know that lives out here? Like, come on now. I could easily just drop off my friend at a home. It doesn't matter what community I'm in, where I'm from. And later I found out my friend told me his partner had his hand on his gun already prepared. So I'm like, this is the 21 weeks of training that we're seeing. Right. Then I got back in the city. I was dropping my other friend off. I was dropping him off at his home. I got pulled over at a red light. The cop, he told me my tail light was out, and he asked for my ID. I gave my ID. Then his partner asked for everyone else in the car's ID. Now, as everybody, no one moves fastly just because of everything going on in the media. He was like, oh, you can reach for it. We're not going to shoot you. And he laughed. You laugh at this. This is 21 weeks of training. There's no psychological training going on, no racial bias training. You can laugh when there's people of my color dying every day because of people like you. So when it comes to police brutality, the 21 weeks, you can easily see it. Police need to be policed by not only their union, who doesn't police them at all, but they need to be policed by the people of the community because we're the ones experiencing them the most.
Mm-hmm. And I just wanted to say, with the conversation of gun violence, people forget to acknowledge that police brutality is gun violence, and it's a part of that spectrum, and it should be amplified in that same sense. If you want to talk about suicide by firearms or school shootings or inner city shootings every single day, police brutality fits that same spectrum because you're excessively using a firearm on a person who is not protecting themselves. They're using you to protect them. So it kind of contradicts itself in how this has this systematic racism and warped with police brutality. And the victims of this are people of color at higher disproportionate rates. So,
and if I just like to add, like, these stories that you hear on the media, like almost every other day of some police brutality happening, like, these are the stories we hear, but then there's like the stories right in jail, like, yeah. You know, like these, like even those stories, like I'm sure y'all have heard as well, like, you know, knowing, you know, black men and women who go to jail, like whenever I would go visit my brother, like I'd be scared to leave, like I would be scared to leave him there because I'm like, yo, I don't know what they doing to him. Like he was saying that some guy, you know, he'd call him like terrible names, and he had like the Nazi symbol tattooed on him, and he's in charge of my brother in jail. He's in charge of his meals. He's in charge of his freedom, how much time he spends in solitary confinement. He's in charge of all of that while he has a swastika tatted on his arm. And you're talking about 21 days, like. These are lives that can be silenced. You don't. Somebody dies in jail, you don't hear about it. They don't put that on the news for what, right? That's really, really, really scary to think about because a lot of these stories, like, you know, that we witness in our communities, it's like that's right in our face. But what about the stories that aren't? What about the people who are silenced? Like that's even scarier to me.
This past summer, I had the privilege of being on the Road to Change tour with the Parkland students for March for Our Lives, speaking about inner city gun violence and like disproportionate rates of black and brown youth, like I said before, but it wasn't frustrating for me to like sit in front of different crowds of people and explain my story. What was frustrating was not having the same airtime as those who had a different story, but it seemed like it was different, but it's actually connected with gun violence. And it felt like me having interviewed David Hogg, and I tell the interviewer, I'm like, you have this platform to either give me 10 minutes or 10 seconds. And they're agreeing with me, like, yeah, you're right. The video airs, I got 1 second. 1 second in the video about the same things that David had said, but it came from my mouth that they didn't want to hear it. And I feel like when you have a person who can speak from experience, it's so much harder to swallow. That doesn't make a good cover story when you have a person from the inner city speaking about the systematic racism that's oppressing them to the place that they live. Because it's a hard pill to swallow. When it's projected in the media, everyone will know about it. And so now we have to get everybody to address it and fix it. That takes time and money, and no one wants to do it. But what Trey was saying, like, as a community who has been oppressed for so long and knowing that we need to work 10 times harder, I don't know about what your mama said, my mama told me to work 10 times harder to be on the same equal playing field as my white counterparts. And that's so much effort and so exhausting and mentally tiring to have to try to exploit myself so people can just hear me for 1 second. 1 second is all you get. And if you make our own media, if we say what we want to say and have spaces like this, how everyone is so attentive and actually listening because they want the message to resonate with them, that's how you progress forward and you have people addressing that what we're talking about is real. You can read stats from a piece of paper, but if you have real people who are in human-like form explain to you that these are the things that we're suffering in our communities, it's true and it's real and it should be the best media you should ever get because it's authentic. But they don't want it. So let's make our own.
The plain and simple answer to that question is you have to make it convenient for them because, trust me, I've been on this topic for a long time. I've contemplated in my mind why, the same questions you're asking, why do I get 1 second but they get 20 minutes on air? And I think the for us mind, by us mindset is extremely important in this circumstance because just like you and Trey, the day before the March for Our Lives rally, we had a rally at our school, just a small one. And David Hogg and Cameron Cassidy came to our school and they spoke and we had a rally and we made posters and things. And what was funny about it was that before this incident, our mayor hadn't said anything on the death of Zaire Kelly, one of the students that had died at my school. But that day, the mayor came to our school. She showed up when she heard they were coming. She came, she waved at the camera, she spoke for 5 minutes and she left. She stayed for David and Cameron's speech, but she didn't stay for ours. And she never came back. She hasn't been back. Those cameras, those 20, 25 cameras that were there, they've never been back. So the problem that this arises in our communities is that when the stories that we are telling are the same stories that they are telling, like you had said, it doesn't matter. It makes it seem like it doesn't matter. And I think that in order to get the attention of the media, we have to make it convenient for them, which is the very sad truth, but it is the truth, period.
Oh, I want to say one more thing about the media. Just like, oh my God, you have to just about be radical just to get any sort of media attention. Like at Saints Barnett with the Brave, we go out and we march every single Friday in the summer, and specifically into places where a recent shooting had happened. We would march to that neighborhood, pray at the corner, talk to people in the community, pass out flyers, try to get information and solve the crime or whatever. And we do that every Friday, get very to little media attention. We literally shut down the Dan Ryan Expressway in Chicago. We had to do that just to get some sort of media attention. And it took, thousands of people on a highway for you to listen about Black and brown youth dying every day in your exact city. Like, that doesn't make any sense that our media sources there don't even care about the people there. I know our friends from Parkland, they came and spoke at a rally. Mind you, this rally had 7 activists from Chicago speak and talk about the police brutality, the day-to-day shootings, and everything going on in the city. The media only showed one person speaking, and that was my friend from Parkland. Like, the media doesn't care at all about the violence going on in our communities. And honestly, it's only us that care about it. And we have to make sure that we still care about it, because I know we can become complacent with everything going on. We can hear gunshots, police sirens, and just be like, well, that's just how it is here. We can't sit down and accept that. We have to stay angered by people dying in our community.
So often in today's news, you hear about nonviolent Black Americans who are imprisoned for drug-related crimes. However, this stereotype doesn't just exist in prison populations. The murder of Botham John, an unarmed Black man who was killed by an off-duty police officer in his own home, was disregarded by several media outlets because a small amount of marijuana was found in his apartment. How do you think these stereotypes relate to the school-to-prison pipeline and levels of mass incarceration in urban communities across the country?
Okay, so who are all like DC natives? Oh, you're giving up fat hay? Okay, well, who, when you're in high school or middle school, who has ever had to walk through a metal detector? Okay, who felt good walking through a metal detector? Right. I think a lot of things, if Coretta Scott King, she talked about like her husband being shot and killed in an act of violence. But then she went on and she said, like, there's so many different things that can fit the conversation of violence. Not giving students books is violence. Not giving students food for lunch is violence. Having metal detectors in a school is violence. They're different outlets from what violent is, and it's just your own perception of what can or can't be violent. School to prison pipeline is violent. It's having this metal detectors, armed guards, and like this idea that when you walk through this school, you're walking through a prison because it resembles it. If you're not having enough funding for Black and brown students to have the right books, for Black and brown students to have the right curriculums, the right teachers, the right after-school activities, you're just programming them to believe that when they leave high school, they're going to go to prison. In Milwaukee, $1.9 million was taken out of funding and put into safety protocols instead of restorative justices. When you're over here suspending brown and Black kids 3 times more than white students, you're not giving them the opportunity to change their lives and to understand why they were even put in that situation in the first place. If you're not having restorative justices and having a conversation and communicating with it, in our community, communication just is so taboo. We don't talk about the issues we go through because we don't want to be tied down to it. Mental health, you want to talk about that? No, pray it out, go to church. You can't say all these other things because it's a taboo to have communication. So when you are communicating with brown and Black students, you're leaving them high and dry because they can't express themselves in an area where they're deemed as prisoners, when they're deemed as threats to society. The school to prison pipeline diminishes brown and Black students' success. It diminishes their futures because they're believing that once they leave school, they're going to go to prison. No outlets, no opportunities, no ways for them to graduate because they're being suspended for petty behavior. Petty behavior suspensions are easier just to condense the student body. And if you're not addressing that and talking to your school board or actually running for school board, because you can run for school board at 18 years old. I don't know if people knew that. You can be in charge of how these students are being expelled. Is that a word? No. Expelled, thank you. Expelled and suspended because it's real. Like, if you're walking through a metal detector, you don't feel good about that. They don't trust you already before you even start the day. They don't trust you already before they even see your test score, how you are as a student communicating with your peers. And before mass shootings in white suburban areas, there were metal detectors, and when my mom went to school, but she went to a school, a predominantly African-American school, there were metal detectors in lots of inner city schools. And that's just what you're saying about having that apathy, it's conditioned. We don't care about that because we thought it was normalized. That's not normal.
Yeah, education is kind of like my passion, and so I think about this a lot. I think about the school to prison pipeline like all the time, especially thinking about both of my brothers who've both been incarcerated for multiple years. And another book, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to be that person, but you guys should definitely also read David Walker's Appeal. It's like he kind of rewrites the Constitution. It's really, really interesting. He talks about the detriment of the Black community. Hear me out before y'all go out. The detriment of the Black community is that we have been conditioned and kind of it's been normalized to kind of, expect far less from each other. So slaves, right? The way that they were conditioned to think that everything's fine, like we're good right now, is by, like a parent would be happy if their kid, right after slavery, if their kid knew how to read, they thought that was enough. Even if their kid read at like a kindergarten school level, like this is what David Walker was talking about. And they would be happy about that. They'd be like, oh, my kid is so smart, my kid is so this, but put next to their white counterpart, it's not the same. Now, when we think about legislature like No Child Left Behind, right, which was ratified by President Obama, we think about that, we think, oh yeah, they're helping us, but what are we expecting? What does the legislature even mean? How has it been changing? What are the statistics? It hasn't changed much, right? And so it's just a cover word. It's just like, we've conditioned ourselves again to think, oh, my kid is good. Like my mom brags, and I'm sure there's a lot of college students here. I'm sure your moms brag too. Your auntie, your grandma, your neighbor from down the street, the girl she never seen in like 3 weeks, but she stopped her and she be like, yo, my daughter's going to GW. All right. Yeah, and I think sometimes we've conditioned ourselves to be like, proud of these small accomplishments, and we forget again about what's the point. And I think like we gotta break out of that. Like I really do. I think as people we gotta break out of that. And I think when we think about like the school to prison pipeline, like I went to an ANC meeting in Southeast DC like a month ago, and I was sitting there quiet, which is hard for me, y'all. And I was sitting there quiet, and I was just like, listening to what was happening. And there's a very strong elder community there, a strong elder Black community there. I was just sitting there listening, and there was a lot of anger from the elder Black community, and they were saying, like, you need to start incarcerating these men. You need to start incarcerating these kids. They keep messing up my block. They keep doing this. What are these even? One of the quotes was, stop putting your money into these rehabilitation programs. They don't work. Just incarcerate them all. Stop giving them a timeout. And me sitting there as a woman who've had both of her brothers incarcerated, right, for years. My dad was in and out of jail my whole entire life. I was like, damn, that's how you feel? Like, really? And it was Black people saying this. Like, okay, forget all that other stuff. Like, it was Black people saying this. Like, people who've been alive 10 times, not 10 times, but like, longer than me. I just dragged it, but like, longer than me. And I remember like thinking to myself, like, as a people, we got work to do. Like, and so when I think about this, the school to prison pipeline, I'm thinking about like, we need to fortify our communities. Like, we really, really do. And like, yes, legislature, like all of that stuff is important. That's like a whole other rant. But I really do think as a Black community, we kind of need to fortify ourselves and like start educating each other on what's going on. And so, yeah, that's kind of my 2 cents on it. I really do feel like, we've dropped the ball. We've gotten complacent in terms of the education system in this country. And that complacency, I really do believe, is what got Donald Trump elected. Like, I think our complacency, our unwillingness to vote, our unwillingness to go out, like, just sitting there and letting it happen to us. Like, if we could find, someone said this to me the other day, if we can find a way to mobilize millennials, we would be unstoppable. So if one of y'all got that idea, do it.
1980. This is my history book. 1980, 1997. Like, I'm thinking this is normal. I'm not understanding that we're supposed to get new books every year. I'm not knowing that we're supposed to know, like, our history books shouldn't stop at George Bush.
Right.
Like, I didn't know that.
Right.
So, just speaking about the school to prison pipeline, like, it's just so lacking. It's just so lacking. Like, my friend, he went to a different high school than me, and his teacher, like, for whatever reason, they quit during the school year. Well, at the beginning of school, they just quit. Maybe it was underpaid, they didn't like what they were doing, but they quit. Every day for the rest of that school year, they had a different substitute teacher in that same class. So imagine if you have to take the ACT this school year and your math teacher is a different substitute every single day for the rest of the school year. This doesn't happen in other schools. It's only inner city schools that have these problems with our teachers, with our books, with our resources and everything going on. So if I get like an 11 or a 12 on the ACT, you think I'm going to college? No. I have to go, I have to graduate, hopefully, and then I still have to survive. I can't do that with a minimum wage job all the time, so I have to go and do what I have to do. So if that means selling drugs, that means robbing people. It all stemmed from the school system failing me. Now I have to go to prison. So the school to prison pipeline is just angry.
Yeah, I think the school to prison pipeline it's almost comical in a sense because it's the same story over and over again. We walk into school, we go through metal detectors with an ID on our chest, and we walk around all day doing the exact same thing. I'm also a twin, and if you go to GW, then you know that there's a high school on campus, School Without Walls. My twin sister goes to School Without Walls, and I go to school in Southeast DC. So seeing those differences and going back every day to the same household, it's hilarious. And I'm not going to get into like the semantics of the issue, but it's different. My textbooks, like we get assigned chapters every week to like read and take notes on, and like I just can't do my homework because sometimes my textbook doesn't have that chapter, and that's the reality of the situation. But my sister has textbooks on her iPad, so it's just it's. But you were talking about complacency, goes back to what I was saying about the mental health issues and just us as a community being okay with this. And yeah, those elders in the Black community, I know like exactly the community they're talking about. And they think like that. Like they actually believe the stuff that's coming out of their mouths, and it's crazy to think, and it's I don't know, comical.
And can I just say, like, just because you mentioned something that was like, you were like, history shouldn't end at George Washington, and it just started sparking stuff in my head, and I was just thinking about just like even the quality of education we receive and like what they're teaching us, like, yo, teach me about my history. Like, why do I have to go to college and pay $70,000 a year? Y'all all struggling because y'all clap now. Come on, tuition now. No, but yes, why do I have to pay that much money to learn like this much about where I come from and about my blackness? Like, why do I have to come to an institution like this? Like, why wasn't I taught that before? And what's crazy is I went to an all-white high school. Like you would have thought, like, with those resources, I would be able to learn about where I come from. And I think that's why students, like, nowadays are so disengaged. Like, they don't want to hear about these colonizers. Like, I'm sorry, but it's true. Like, they don't want to hear about that. And I think it's crazy that we're making our youth have to hear about this, and we're not enabling them to have self-discovery and self-education, and that, like, you know, that empowerment that comes from that. I think that's really, really crazy, because then they're disillusioned. And when they come to college, like a lot of us, we have bad study habits. We have bad work ethic. Whatever. I don't believe that, but we have bad work ethic or whatever the case may be. But that's because our whole entire life we've been conditioned to learn about people and things that all they've done our entire existence is push us down, right? Like, I think that's really, really crazy. About the education system, I think like curriculum. That's the first thing that pops in my head. I'm like, curriculum, because a lot of times we like forget that that's the whole crux of it. Like, what are we teaching these children? Like, yeah, all these things are messed up. Like, everything we were just saying about like the school to prison pipeline, but also let's start with school, like education. Like, what are we teaching these children so that they have the tools to be able to kind of move forward in the society that we have right now?
Gun homicide is the leading cause of death of young black males aged 15 to 24. Black males are 13 times more likely to be shot and killed by police than white males. Black males are 16 times more likely to be shot and injured in an assault involving firearms than white males. Black women are at least 2 times more likely to be shot and killed by an intimate partner than white women are. Black children are 10 times more likely to be victims of gun homicides than white children are. Other transgender individual shot and killed in the U.S. in 2017, 80% were black women. So my question is, well, besides all of that, so like the main focus of this was talking about police brutality, but what about like black on black crime? Like, how do you talk about that? Like, what about that? Like, how do we prevent that? So earlier, I don't know your name, but you go to Thurgood Marshall, so I also knew Zaire Kelly. He was killed by a black man, shot in the head and robbed. Up the street from my house in Lincoln Heights, it was a drive-by shooting called 10-year, and they killed a 10-year-old girl. So like, what do we, like, it's easy to point a finger at the police, but like, let's start holding ourselves accountable. Like, what can we do to change our community, make sure our community is better? Because obviously, they're not going to hear us if we're killing each other.
Right.
So how will you do that?
Right.
A quote I say all the time is, everyday shootings are everyday problems, and that's just mainly talking about crimes that go on in our community. And yeah, we did speak about police brutality, but trust me, we are all still very angry about the shootings going on in our community. And I think that's something that the media doesn't always cover. Like I was talking about in Chicago, they don't always cover when we march every single Friday in the black community where shootings occurred. People don't like to listen to us protesting about the things happening to us. They like to just act like it's not happening. So you'll see us marching about police brutality, but we're also marching about the brother that was shot in my community. So also, the way we address that, we shouldn't be pointing fingers, but we do need to understand the things that are happening around us. Our education system is a lot worse than everyone else's. Guns are getting flooded into our community. Like, there was a train that just so happened to stop inside of Inglewood with assault rifles on it. Come on now, that don't even make sense. So there's guns being put in our community. We're being locked up at unproportionate rates. When you get locked up, you have a felony. And it's very, very tough to get a legitimate job with a felony. Like my father, he works for a workforce program, and he's trying to get guys jobs. But these places say, oh, we do second chances, we do that. They don't really do that. So getting people jobs, that's tough. So it's a lot of things going on in the black community. I'm not saying we should point fingers, but we do need to understand it's a lot of things contributing to the situations going on around us.
I just want to say I really appreciate you for that question, because I think as a community we do need to hold ourselves accountable for things that we do. Sorry. But I'm so sorry. But when people say, like, what about black on black crime? That's a red herring to turn your attention from the serious issue. Like, after the Black Lives Matter, people were protesting saying black on black crime, these are the stats, these are the problems, all these different things. That's diverting our attention from the idea that Black Lives Matter. You feel me? So it's like when they said black on black crime, just like what this young lady was saying, white on white crime happens too. Of course, if I live in an area where there's heavily people of color there, that's how high the crime's gonna be. That's just what's gonna happen. And when you say holding each other accountable, I talked about this before, but getting to the root of the problem and actually finding why we have these different stems of violence within our communities is how we get rid of that black on black crime. It's how we get rid of that idealism that we are hurting each other in our community. We want to get better, but if we're still doing the same things that are bounding us to this failure, we're not going to move forward. So if we're able to have conversations, communicate with each other, just like what we're doing now, we're able to move forward because that hurt like binds us together. My hurt that I feel of being a woman of color binds with her as well, because we're under the same umbrella. And black on black crime is just a thing that contradicts the idea that we're trying to be better as a community, but when you throw it in our face that there's so many different people that are dying by the hands of a black man by a black man, it's just saying that you don't trust us and believing that we're trying to get better. And it's hard. Like there's a quote by MLK. He says like, my life begins to end the day I become silent about the things that matter. I'm not going to advocate for brown and black people without holding myself accountable for what is happening within our community, because we're not perfect. No one is perfect. But the system, we have so many years of systematical oppression that we're understanding it and we feel it and we don't know how to put our anger to something positive. That's when you sit someone down and you say, you don't have to follow this narrative. You don't have to be the same butt of the same rhetoric that you've been taught all your life. You need to move past that and reform that and be a better person. The best community that we can be. So I don't believe in black on black crime. That's not real.
Yes. And also, first of all, I'd be remiss if I didn't mention that black and black crime also encapsulates the Latino community, because I'm an Afro-Latina myself, and I'll be remiss if I didn't mention that. Just because, we're mentioning about looking at other communities, and that's a community that needs work. But I think as a society, we've gotten into this reactive mindset. And we're never proactive, never. Like, only when the problem arises do we care. Like, only when, just to put it in our terms, only when that extension's coming do we study. And it's true, it's what we do with politics too. Like, we've become kind of lazy. Like, we're like, oh, black and black crime, what about that? Oh, well, what about our education system that you haven't really financed in decades? What about that? Like, literally, what about that? Like, you don't think that, literally plucking a male father figure from a young black man's life affects how he thinks about social relationships for the rest of his life? Right? So my brother, right, and the only reason I even share this is because he shared this story himself. My brother, he was incarcerated for armed robbery. And, I had a lot of people, sitting in my high school white classrooms, we was talking about mass incarceration, and they was talking about, they deserve it, how you gonna go out there and rob people, whatever, right? And I'm sitting there quiet, just thinking about all the different ways to think about it, right? Because if I got robbed, I'm gonna be pissed, I'm gonna be mad, like I worked hard for this, right? But then, when my brother got incarcerated, in the report, what ended up happening was he was high off drugs because he was addicted to them. And he goes outside and he pulls out a knife on somebody. He says, give me everything you got. And as the guy is emptying his pockets, he goes, I'm really sorry to do this. I have a daughter on the way, right? And boom, it just like, while I was sitting in that classroom, in my white classroom in high school, I'm just thinking like, damn, y'all got, like, y'all got no type of empathy or knowledge about what really goes on in the hood. Like, my brother had a daughter on the way. My brother was 18 years old. When I was 18, I was worried about my senior prom. Like, I'm not worried about no kid on the way, right? And so we've conditioned, our communities to not believe in birth control, right? We don't give them access to healthcare, right? We don't give them access to, good education. We don't give them access to anything worth, like living, right? They're hungry. There's food insecurity, food deserts, right? And then we wonder why they robbing. Bro, really? No, for real, really? They can't get jobs. They can't graduate high school. They can't get food to feed their daughters. They didn't have the health care to stop that daughter in the first place. And now you're really wondering why they're going out there and doing these things. And I think it's a much broader discussion when we talk about black and black crime, to answer your question. I think it's a broader discussion. I think it's a cop-out. Just like what you just said, it's a cop-out. It's a cop-out to say, what about black on black crime? Nah, let's think, all right, you want to start that conversation? We could start that conversation, because it's a cycle. And we got to be real about it now. The reason why nobody talks about it, is because it costs bread. That's why nobody's talking about all what it means, what that really means, what black and black crime means. Because if we really started that conversation, they would have been sorry they started it.
Talk about the U.S. government. They were ready to apologize about slavery, but refrained because they didn't want the idea of reparations being brought up. Mm-hmm. So in our DC history class, we talked about ideas of how to implement reparations, and there are ways to do it, but it's just not happening. And everybody left the class kind of hopeless. They were like, yeah, it's not gonna work out. But it kind of made me feel hope because it was being talked about in a classroom in the first place. So if you guys could talk about how to get that conversation started, and maybe any personal ideas that you feel that reparations should be implemented, whether it's in college tuitions or putting money into neighborhoods that need them, and education, which I think was a very strong point.
Honestly, college tuitions, yup, it was all free tuition. Yup. I think it's it's GW. It's GW. GW has this thing where it's if your ancestors, some craziness, if you you have ancestry from slavery or something like that, and you can prove that, you can get free tuition here. Yeah, y'all, yeah. But the thing is, that's hard to prove. Let me tell y'all something though. Y'all know Professor Marcus? Yeah, I actually learned that from her. So anyways, back to this. The reason I bring that up is because how hard is it to prove that you have ancestry from, how hard is that to prove? No, for real though, really think about it. Because it's super hard because they didn't keep records. Some of them don't even know, when they were born, what day, right? So you think they're gonna keep records of all the slaves they had by name, first and last? Right, and I'm just really? So I think it's also for me in terms of reparations, I'm thinking way broader. Because do y'all know Ta-Nehisi Coates? That's my man. And he gave this speech at Harvard one time, and he was talking about reparations, and he was talking about slavery and how we think about slavery as a human injustice, but we don't think about it in terms of capital. And if y'all didn't know, slavery was the biggest money-making industry in the country that has ever existed to this day. To this day. So let's stop thinking about what you owe us because it was wrong. No. What you owe us because that money is what talks. You know what I'm saying? And the only reason why you have that ancestral bread, if you look at these rich people, sorry, rich white people, but if you look at them, it's because the money has been passed down. Where do you think that money came from? Right? And so at the end of the at the end of the day, it's true though. At the end of the day, that's where it comes from. And we have cyclical poverty. It's the same thing. And so when I'm thinking about reparations, I think we need to stop, in order to have a real conversation nationally, I think we need to stop talking about it in terms of it's a human service, but rather is what's deserved in terms of paying back just capital, just the work that was put in, right? We talk about America being, the land of opportunity and fairness and equality, and anyone can get rich. All right, let's get that started then. Let's talk about what really got y'all rich, And let's rehearse that.
So I have a very different background from y'all. I came from, I want to call it like a upper black middle class. So I kind of experienced the white life and experienced the black life. Because, anyways, that's my background. So my dad's a doctor, my mom's a manager. I ended up here. So my question is, how do we get generational knowledge in the black community? Because I'm in the B school right now. I'm in the business school. I'm learning about investment. I'm learning about banking. I'm learning about financial literacy. All this stuff, our normal black brothers don't know that. I'm playing basketball today, literally 2 hours ago, and I'm realizing I'm having a conversation about financial literacy. I'm having a conversation about investment with other black dudes who don't know this stuff. And I'm like, why do I know this stuff? And I realized, wait, my dad's a doctor. That's not normal.
Yeah.
Normal black families don't have doctors.
Yep.
You know what I mean? So how do we get that started in our community?
I can relate to that sort of the way you were brought up, because my dad is a lawyer, my mom is a realtor, and I grew up in that upper black middle class.
Excellent.
So I also have that experience. I go to Thurgood Marshall now because that's my choice, because I want to be in that community with my people. But I also, my middle school, my elementary school, all white schools. So that way, the way to get that generational knowledge is just the way that you had that. I know y'all had to talk. When y'all sit down and say, just like in the Hate U Give, when the police pull you over, this is what you do. This is what the reality of being a black person in America. Just as we had those talks, you need to have talks about financial literacy. You need to invest in those classes, because investing is the most important thing you can do as a black man or woman. I'm telling you. It comes, I'm not gonna speak for us, but it comes naturally to me, because if I have a question, my mom can answer it like that, or my dad can answer it like that. But we also need to have those type of people in the black community, so I don't have to go out of my way to get my question answered about how I'm going to pay for college, or how I'm going to get this money to get this degree, to then get this job, to then get this money. Like, that's just, it's all the system, and it's important for it to be from us. Because if we put it in the hands of our government or our lawmakers, our policymakers, then there's no guarantee that it'll get done. So I think that it's important that if we truly want the change to be made in our communities, then we have to put it there. Because we can't, the time is done for us to be trusting other people to do it for us. We have to do it ourselves if we want it to be done right. And that's what I always learn.
Yeah. I agree as well, especially what you were saying about, because I live in inner city, I can't sound that by now. And I went to school in white suburban, and there were times like I was learning all this information, and I would go back to my inner city and doing all these different clubs with black people, and I'd say something, and they'll be like, "Why you talk white? Or why you acting white? Or, like, why do you know that? Why do you like to read?" Like all these different things that are just like normal for me, that I picked like the same mannerisms from like the kids at school, and I just take a look back and not get angry, but be like, these kids like don't understand that. Like they don't know what it feels like to be too black for the white kids and too white for the black kids, and trying to find like the intersection of like who you are as a person. And as a community, we've had an identity crisis for so long, and like being in society now, I'm learning all this information. I can do these things, and talking to my black brothers and sisters, they condemn me for it. And it's like that competition, not even within the black community, just any like community of color, we're competing against each other, and we don't want to see each other succeed. Then when I talk to you and I know your dad's a doctor, I'm like, oh, you rich, you bougie. I'm not supporting you. I'm not supporting your dad. I'm not supporting his come up, his study, all the hours he had to put in to be a doctor so he can save my life. That's terrible. And when it comes to like implementing that in like communities, there's so many different organizations within like inner cities and impoverished areas that need money and resources to fund and help other people, but we're not putting our money and our dollars to these businesses. We'd rather give it to the capitalist dollar and see change in that way, but not give it to like these black-owned businesses when we can make change in that way. And we're not, if I know I have the knowledge and the power to help other people, but I'm not branching that out and giving it to it, what am I doing with this knowledge? What am I doing with like the bravery that I have to sit up here in front of college students? I'm not in college yet, I'm scared of y'all a little bit, but I'm able to sit and talk to you guys about these issues because somebody in these seats probably don't even know. And if I'm able to have this information, I should be implementing it and sharing it, spilling my little bit of tea so you guys can drink it up so we can keep it going. And if this conversation stays in this room, we're failing everybody sitting in these seats. If it doesn't go outside that door, we're failing everybody who was able to come here. We're failing the kids in Chicago, the kids in Milwaukee, because we need this conversation to keep going at GW. You guys have resources. Tuition $70,000, you got resources. Do something. And having this competition, this negative mindset that my brother can't do better than me because I want to be in this spot, we need to destroy that. Because I have information. I'm not the smartest person. My mama still teach me stuff. I'm like, oh, that's cool, because I want to know more so I can help more.
I was just wondering, like, what does activism really look like beyond our screens? Because we were talking about how the media doesn't care about us. Like, what can we do to, like, educate people more who might not know what we know and might not feel what we feel and go through what we go through?
Okay. Well, just speaking to like what activism is, at least to me, activism doesn't have to be something major. It doesn't have to be you speaking on TV, speaking in front of a whole bunch of people, doing a march, any of that. Honestly, activism to me is just talking to your peers seriously about things going on in your community and trying to change the things going on in your community. Whether that means just talking to the dude that's usually on the corner, seeing how his life is going, just talking to him and informing him about different things going on in the community. That's activism to me. So I think that we can do a lot of things in the community, whether that's talking to the older people, just listening to them, because honestly, I'm not gonna lie, I get tired of older people telling me to put my pants up. Because like, I do not. But like just providing them with a little bit of respect and they coming up to us with a little bit of respect and we talk to each other and we bridge that gap and we communicate and I learn things from them about the community and the things they went through. That can help me change the things going on in the community now. So just communicating, that's one of the big parts, and just trying to get involved with local organizations or creating your own local organization to try to be the change in that community.
And it starts at home. Like, I think sometimes I get lazy because my mom's, she's an immigrant and like she don't really know English that well, and like sometimes it'd be hard just to explain to her why she should vote. Like, it just be draining. Like, it's draining to be like, Ma, like this is why you should vote. Like, it's important. Like, this is on the line. This is on the line. And she's like, girl, shut up. Like, I gotta go to my second job right now. Like, I gotta go. Like, I gotta make ends meet so I could put you through school. You know what I'm saying? And it's hard for me to rant to her, like, take a day off work that you need to go vote, right? And so when I think about, what was the question? Damn. Activism, yes. When I think about activism, it starts at home. When I think about my mom, I trail off, but yeah, like when I think about activism, I think it starts at home. Like, educate your bro, like, the kid you grew up with ever since you were small, whatever. Like me, like sometimes I have survivor's guilt. Like I'm here in at GW, and all my friends, my best friends, they left behind. My brothers, they got left behind. My mom, my sisters, everybody. And I think sometimes we forget to go back and like share that message with people. Like, share what you learned in your class, whatever. Dumb it down if you have to, speak in those terms, but let them know. Like, I sit there and I talk to my brother. Like, I think sometimes my brothers be like, yo, I put myself in this situation, like, da-da-da. I'm like, yes, responsibility is key, but these are all the things that were working against you. Like, I don't think you knew that. Like, I taught my brother about what mass incarceration is and what's happening in our country, and he didn't even know he was experiencing it. And I think it's important to educate what's happening. Exactly what you said, have the talk. You know your rights, like, let's Google them together, like, whatever. Let's Google them together, like, let's do that. And volunteering, like, a lot of us are GW students, DC books to prisons, literally like 4 or 5 blocks away from here. You can go pack books for prisoners, go send them, write a letter to them, like, do your part. Like, it could be as small, and I agree, like, activism doesn't have to be this huge thing where you make posters and put them on Instagram and that's your statement. Like, that don't do as much as actually going out there and talking to the community. It doesn't do as much, I promise you.
Just speaking to voting as well, that's one big part of activism that we tend to like ignore and overlook, because I learned this from my mentor. He talked to mayor, and the mayor told him that they, after the election, they look at the communities that voted, not who they voted for, what policy they wanted. They just look at what communities that voted. And 9 times out of 10, the communities that voted aren't the ones that truly need resources, and that's the ones that are going to get the resource because they're going to vote again. So one big part of activism that we need to push, that's starting to be pushed now, is voting, especially in our community, because we're the ones suffering from the most.